All right, so our psalm today, I chose 105. Because today we're going to be talking about the other sort of countries or areas around Judah, Moab and Syria and Egypt. Hope we might get to Egypt.
Syria all the way at the top.
Yep. Everybody knows where Syria is. All right. But we'll get to that. So anyhow, and how Isaiah hopes that all those countries come to know Yahweh. And I thought this psalm was a sort of in response to that, a little bit more positive, because we know the prophecies in Isaiah are a little tough sometimes. So Psalm 105. Alleluia. Give thanks to Yahweh, call on his name, proclaim his deeds to the peoples, sing to him, make music for him, recount all his wonders. Glory in his holy name, let the hearts that seek Yahweh rejoice. Seek Yahweh and his strength, tirelessly seek his presence. Remember the marvels he has done, his wonders, the judgments he has spoken. Stock of Abraham, his servant, children of Jacob, whom he chose. He is Yahweh our God. His judgments touch the whole world. All right, so we are at Isaiah 15, and we might get through 19 today.
No chance.
My reading, I've been catching up, but not quite there.
All right, so Isaiah 15. So if you have our books, we have Golden Gaze book. We are starting on page 62. All right, 15:1 is on page 62. So last week we talked about that there's this is a different kind of section here in Isaiah where the prophecies are about other countries. All right, and it started off against Babylon. And remember, Isaiah is a collection of prophecies. It's not a chronological thing. Even within the writings that the passages we look at today, they're not in chronological order. All right, so it gets a little. So if you read along, you're like, oh, wait a minute. It's because it's not put into a chronological order sequence as far as the collections. So last we talked about Babylon, and then Assyria and Philistia, the Philistines, which, all right, so I'm gonna look at the map, or maybe Angie can point at the map. They're above Jeff's head. For those who are on Zoom.
I'm right in front of them now, I'm looking.
All right, so you might need to stand on Jeff's left side. Yes. All right, so those on Zoom, the purple is Judah. The purple section is Judah. The green section is what used to be Israel. All right. All right, so Angie, point to where Philistia is. They're on the coast. All right, so the Philistines, and we talked last week, who was the most famous Philistine?
Goliath.
Goliath. All right, and then Moab is to the east of
Near the
Judah.
desert.
Yep. All right, and there are other places in the Old Testament where Moab is talked about, the Moabites. One is in Genesis, where the comments about the Moabites tend to be pretty derogatory. But there also was a famous, she had her own story, a Moabite. She has her own book. Ruth was a Moabite. Remember, the Israelites had gone over to Moab because there had been a severe drought. And so that's how she met her husband and died, but ended up following her mother-in-law back to Judah. All right.
Real quick question on the folks that are up there. What we see is mirror image on the map for you guys. Are you guys seeing the Israel on the right-hand side of the ocean or the left-hand side of the ocean?
It's really too small to tell, but I think it looks right to me. But it's so small. I mean, the blue of the ocean is on the left-hand side of the picture from what I see.
All right, so it's
All
just, it's reflecting mirror image stuff.
So the
Okay.
basic gist is Philistine is right on the coast, is a narrow strip right on the coast. Moab is to the east. Syria is to the north. We all know where Syria is, and then we all know where Egypt is. And then Sudan. Sudan comes into passages today also. And Sudan is just south of Egypt. All right. So if looking at Isaiah 15 through 16, okay. So I want to kind of talk through this passage a little bit, and then we'll go back and read it, okay? These passages, starting with last week, all right, starting with Babylon, Assyria and then Babylon, they were written in the Hebrew pretty much as poetry. There are some parts that are written in prose, but for the most part, they are written as poetry. All right, so you can see like in Golden Gaze book, it's set up. In my Bible, it's set up like poems also. So not every Bible does that. All right. And I've wondered if in writing things in poetry, it makes it easier for folks to remember,
Oh, yeah.
you know? So,
If you look at the oral tradition, you also notice a lot of repetition. So like they also always have like some kind of refrain or something, keywords. So you know, oh, I've gotten to that keyword now. And so that helps you remember all of that. Because I'm sure a lot of this was originally told
yeah, yeah,
to each other.
Oh,
So
yeah.
they had all kinds of ways to help you remember it.
right. Because remember, a very small number of people could read. So, all right. So things in Moab.
Very few people can read. Some things just don't change.
All right. So this passage, chapters 15 and 16, is also pretty much repeated in Jeremiah, the book of Jeremiah, chapter 48, whatever that's worth. And remember, Jeremiah, looking on the timeline. Yeah, he is a little bit later. Isaiah is thought to have been written, a lot of it, in the 800s, 800 to 700. Jeremiah was in the 700 to 600. So
David was preaching on Jeremiah this morning, and he talked about how Jeremiah, it's all like sadness and lamentations and you know, a lot of tears in Jeremiah. And he also said that it's the one class that broke kittens class. It's like the Bible that just, he said, apparently finally broke them. Just all of the sadness and doom and gloom and dismal outlooks of the future and everything. It was just like,
yeah, well, we'll see how we get through Isaiah.
well, I mean, Isaiah is like, he's angry with him. It's like, we know.
Yeah, there's a lot of
Isaiah's
anger.
angry.
It's not so much
I
doom and gloom.
get where it's like Isaiah is in like the current state of the world. Jeremiah is in the post climate change world where so just perspective on Jeremiah versus Isaiah. That's my vision right here.
Well, isn't Isaiah warning, this is what's going to
Yes,
happen
yes.
to everyone. So here now, because all of these countries that have turned from Yahweh are going to be or have been destroyed, depending on where you are chronologically.
Right, yeah, because it goes back and forth.
Yeah, and the question becomes, are you going to learn from this, Israel?
Yeah, yeah. Are you gonna
Or
learn?
are you going to repent before destruction?
Right.
Yeah, and
But it's
Jeremiah
already
is,
telling
it's like,
you,
it's
no,
already too late,
Yeah,
it's been destroyed.
But I know your part in your practice.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like,
So-
let's find a way to like
You
get it back
goofy
together
people.
again.
Oh, me. Okay. All right. So getting to Moab and the, all right. So this is a vision of Moab's destruction, but devastation has already pretty much overtaken that area. All right, so while during the time of Ruth, people went there to escape the drought, things aren't as good for Moab at this time. During the Assyrian conquest of this area, and that conquest went all the way down into Egypt. I mean, it was a huge, vast area. Moab tried to, the area of Moab, because these aren't really solid countries, boundaries and all that stuff, borders and stuff. But anyhow, so Moab tried to join in with Judah for a little protection, and these verses talk some about that. All right. So just to give you some insight as far as that the readers would have known at the time of Isaiah. Okay. And it starts off with, so we're at 16:1. And in these first several verses, there's a listing of cities within Moab that pretty much start, the listing of them as far as their location starts at the north, and then it moves down south. Okay, so people were basically, in Assyria's northeast of Judah. So people were fleeing, I guess you could say, to the south to avoid the
Assyria,
Assyrians.
is that synonymous with Syria? I mean,
No, Assyria was over where Iraq, Iran.
Okay.
All right. Babylon, because Babylon conquered Assyria. All right, the Assyrians. And Babylon is where modern day Iraq is. Okay. So last week we talked about it was, I have not sure. Yeah, the order of conquest. All right, so it was the Assyrians came through,
Persia.
and then the Babylonians came through. All right. Then the Medes and the Persians came through. All right. And then the Greeks and the Romans came through. So over, centuries, that was the series of conquering
Oh, yeah.
civilizations that came in, and each was a little bit different, as far as how things worked. All right. But that was, so it was a long history of conquest.
Not a fun time to be alive.
But it's a long history. It's a long history of the world. So, okay, if somebody would read 15:1 through 9.
I got
I
it.
can do that.
Oh, who said I got it?
Sarah.
Me. I always read first.
And so do so.
Okay, here goes. A portent concerning Moab. Yes, in the night was Ar sacked. Moab was undone. Yes, in the night it was sacked. Here Moab was undone. They went up to the temple of Dibon, to the high places to weep. For Nebo and for Nedba, Moab wails. Every head in it is shaved. Every beard is shorn. In its streets they are girded with sackcloth. On its roofs and in its squares, all of them are wailing, coming down in tears. Heshbon and Elilah cry out. As far as Jahaz, their voice is heard. Therefore Moab's picked warriors cry, their life breath broken up. My heart for Moab cries out. Those who flee her as far as Zoar and Elgath Cilicia, for by the ascent of Lith and weeping they go up. For on the road to Horonaim they rouse disaster's cry. For the Nimrim waters have become a desolation, for the grass has withered, the vegetation gone, the green growth is no more. Therefore the gains they have made and their stores they bear off to the Wadi of Willows. For screaming encircles the region of Moab, as far as Elgame her wail, to Bir Eliam her wail. For Dimon's waters are full of blood. Yes, I will add still more against Dimon. For Moab survivors, a lion for the remnant of the land.
So things are sad.
Great job on all those words.
Yeah, got all those
Thank you.
places.
Thank
Who's
you.
gonna challenge her?
So, Golden Gay, in opening his commentary on this section, talks about, I don't know if you guys remember a number of years ago in Sudan and the wars there and the mass exodus by people and seeing people just walking in droves through the desert. You know, it's that kind of imagery here for Moab, you know. So the conquest of the different people in Moab, it's just a sad state of affairs. So if somebody now would read 16, 1 through 14.
I got it.
Okay, Catherine's got it.
Send lambs to the ruler of the land from Selah by way of the desert to the mount of daughter Zion. Like fluttering birds, like scattered nestlings, so are the daughters of Moab at the fords of the Arnon. Give counsel, grant justice, made hear shades like night at the height of noon. Hide the outcasts, do not betray the fugitive. Let the outcasts of Moab settle among you, be a refuge to them from the destroyer. When the oppressor is no more, and destruction has ceased, and marauders have vanished from the land, then a throne shall be established in steadfast love in the tent of David, and on it shall sit faithfulness, a ruler who seeks justice and is swift to do what is right. We have heard of the pride of Moab, how proud he is, of his arrogance, his pride, his insolence, his boasts are false. Therefore, let Moab wail. Let everyone wail for Moab. Mourn, utterly stricken, for the raisin cakes of Kir Hareshet. For the fields of Heshbon languish, and the vines of Sibna, whose clusters once made drunk the lords of the nations, reached to Jazer, and strayed to the desert. Their shoots once spread abroad and crossed over the sea. Therefore I weep with the weeping of Jazer, for the vines of Sibma. I drench you with my tears, O Heshbon and Elieleh, for the shout of over your fruit harvest and your grain harvest has ceased. Joy and gladness are taken away from the fruitful field, and in the vineyards no songs are sung, no shouts are raised, no treader treads out wine in the presses. The vintage shout is hushed. Therefore my heart throbs like a harp for Moab, and my very soul for Kir Heres. When Moab presents himself, when he wearies himself upon the high place, when he comes to his sanctuary to pray, he will not prevail. This was the word that the Lord spoke concerning them in the past. But now the Lord says, in 3 years, like the years of a hired worker, the glory of Moab will be brought into contempt in spite of all its great multitude, and those who survive will be very few and feeble. No.
So in this is the part where Moab approaches Judah, tries to get Judah to give them some protection. So what do you see happening here, though?
It is a little bit of a rivalry. It's like you're like calling names back and forth, and saying this, that, and the other. And you've been through the great, now you're going to be brought low. But I mean, I think that that's probably also just looking at the writing on the wall and recognizing, yes,
But I see some statement of here, protect these people
Mhm,
too,
mhm.
you know, like, hide the fugitives. Don't betray the refugees. You know, so there is it kind of, you're asking to absorb these people into your culture.
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah,
and
how do we do that?
This is a constant throughout the Old Testament to care
Right.
for the wanderer in your land, to care for the fugitive because you were once an alien. And I like that even in the face of, you know, this great exodus out of Moab that they're expecting, they're doubling down and saying, do the right thing, do what God has always told you to do, keep these people and care for these people. Because that's hard when you're talking about a lot of them.
Right, you're
Make
talking about
those
trying to,
right decisions.
your own self-preservation, I mean, things in Judah are not in real great shape.
Yeah, I know.
Either, nobody's in really great shape.
Reminds me of so many times in history. I mean, just going back to the Holocaust and Jews trying to escape. And when Helena was here and talking about the only way, my father decided the only way I could survive was to pretend to be Christian. And Christians took her in. You know, they didn't know she was Jewish.
This was during the Holocaust.
During the Holocaust. But then you look at Darfur, the refugees pouring out of Darfur, out of the Congo, people fleeing Cuba during the takeover, you know, and looking for countries that would be willing to give them refuge. You know, it continues to be a pattern historically, and we are told, you know, it is part of our Christian show hospitalities to strangers, for some have entertained angels unaware. You know, that we need to continue to offer hospitality, to take them in, to show them our culture, to show them our beliefs, our values.
And that's been, and at our southern border, which has been such a mess for so many years. The interesting thing is that there is some simpatico between people who are liberal politically and people who are evangelical Christians about being kind to the people on our southern border. So it's interesting. It's a pairing you don't often see, but you sometimes see related to our refugees. So.
And I have a real different take on, you know, it's like, if people are coming in and need refuge, I don't feel like, I feel like I am called as a Christian, or as a nation, we're called to, or as people, we're called to bring them in, but conversion happens in the heart, and it's like, yes, live our lives and let them see that, but not force that upon people. Because
No, I don't think, but I
yeah.
think that part of explaining why we're doing the thing we're doing is, you know, at the school, Miss Hendrickson asked me, why do you do this? Like, you taught for 42 years, why are you back at the school? You know, because God put it on my heart to do this, you know? And when God
That's our
tells you to
witness,
do
yeah.
something, that's always a good plan to go ahead and get in the corner and do that. You know, and, you know, I'm not saying therefore you should listen to what God says, but maybe I've planted a seed of
Yeah.
that.
Well, I mean, and that's, we're here to be witness. Yeah, absolutely. And we should always be here as witness. I think, to me, that's the difference between the evangelical and liberal Christian paths is being witness versus that push and expectation. Having been in Lynchburg, it's like the push and expectation from the Jerry Falwell crew is intense. And it's such a different attitude. And it's a different, I don't know, it's just different. But I do believe, you know, being witness and, you know, and telling people, yes, I feel like I'm called to do this. I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm in the classroom in the first place, is I'm called, I feel called to do this. I feel called to science. I feel called to, these messages and recognizing, these things that I see in the world and where I see, injustice, and I feel called, to do that. But I do like to think that calling and that witness, can show people the kind side of Christianity that it's meant to be, as opposed to the judgment that they oftentimes see in the public media.
I thought it was interesting down at the very end of the passage. When it talks about who's going to be left, a very, 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 very small.
Yeah.
In fact, it says in here,
The remain,
tiny, not much,
right, the remains will be a small thing, tiny, not much.
not much. And how pervasive the evil was throughout the society, that those that had remained faithful to righteousness, small, very small, tiny, but God always allows, we learn that in my religion, God always allows or saves the righteous remnant to start again. I'm not gonna destroy, I'm gonna destroy those that do not follow my ways, but those that have earnestly sought me, we're gonna try again. New covenant.
My-
New covenant.
My Bible has one extra phrase there that changes the whole thing. It says, the smallest bit of no account.
The weakest.
Mine says few and feeble,
Yeah.
which feeble for me means weak.
Mine actually does end up being weak, last
And-
4 words.
And mine even says it will be reduced to nothing, an insignificant remnant.
I think more of that righteous remnant was the outcast that fled.
Well, and they're talking about Moab, right?
Yeah,
Right.
they're talking about Moab, they're not.
Right, and I thought it's
Right.
not about.
Now,
Israel.
to interject,
But they have,
to confuse things even more,
Yeah, it's always good.
that these, I know, my Bible also makes a note that these last couple of verses in 16 may have been a much earlier prophecy that got stuck in here, that got interjected in here. So, anyhow,
Wow.
yeah, so. Yeah, remember the ongoing theme throughout all of this is, what is God wanting, and the prophet, who's getting the message from God, what is he wanting the people of Judah to hear? All right, what is he wanting the people of Judah to hear? All right, so if somebody now will read, we'll move to 17.
no, is he wanting them to hear if this can happen to Moab, it can happen to you?
Yeah, well, that's, yeah, yeah. All right, so now geographically, we're shifting to the north, to Damascus. Remember, Damascus
Syria.
is still a city, still a city.
I can read that. How far do you want? me
All
to
right,
read?
so Damascus and Syria. Proclamation, all right, so how about if you read through 8 and then
Okay.
Susan, you want to read 9 through 14?
Sure.
Because Susan usually reads second.
Yeah.
Susan, you want to read the first?
Read every time.
Some traditions, Sarah reading first, that is.
That's the tradition.
That's okay,
All
so
right, I'll
let's,
read 1 through 8.
yeah,
Okay, the burden of Damascus. Behold, Damascus is taken away from being a city, and it shall be a ruinous heap. The cities of Aroer are forsaken. They shall be for flocks, which shall lie down, and none shall make them afraid. The fortress also shall cease from Ephraim, and the kingdom from
okay, can I
Damascus.
interject?
Yeah.
Ephraim is another name for Israel,
Okay, good. to know.
okay?
Are they referring to all of Israel there? Because I know it's usually just
Well,
a
the-
portion of. or
Yeah, the
region.
Israel that doesn't exist at the time of Isaiah.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
yours says
Ephraim
Israel.
was- I think he was
Okay.
the son of Jacob, right? Ephraim? I think he was the son of Jacob. And that's why,
Yeah, I think it was one of the, yeah.
that's
yeah, so
why
one of
it's
the tribes,
considered
right?
Israel, yeah.
Okay.
The fortress shall also cease from Ephraim, and the kingdom from Damascus, and the remnant of Syria. They shall be as the glory of the children of Israel with the Lord of hosts. And in that day it shall come to pass that the glory of Jacob shall be made thin, and the fatness of his flesh shall wax lean. And it shall be as when the harvestman gathereth the corn, and reapeth the ears with his arm. And it shall be as he that gathereth ears in the valley of Rephaim. Yet gleaning grapes shall be left in it, as the shaking of an olive tree, 2 or 3 berries in the top of the uppermost bough, 4 or 5 in the outmost fruitful branches thereof, saith the Lord God of Israel. At that day shall a man look to his maker, and his eyes shall have respect to the Holy One of Israel. And he shall not look to the altars, the work of his hands, neither shall respect that which his fingers have made, either the groves or the images.
Ephraim was one of the sons of, Joseph, actually.
Joseph,
So
okay.
Joseph had 2 sons, and there was never a region in Israel that was called Joseph. They had Ephraim, and I don't remember what the other second son was.
Manasseh.
Thank you.
Okay. Ready for me to read?
Yes.
In that day, their strong cities, which they left because of the Israelites, will be like the places abandoned, thickets and undergrowth, and all will be desolation. You have forgotten God, your Savior. You have not remembered the rock, your fortress. Therefore, though you set out the finest, the finest plants and plant imported wines, though on the day you set them out, you make them grow, and on the morning when you plant them, you bring them to bud, yet the harvest will be as nothing in the day of disease and incurable pain. Woe to the many nations that rage, they rage like the raging sea. Woe to the peoples who roar, they roar like the roaring of great waters. Although the peoples roar like the roar of the surging waters, when he rebukes them, they flee far away, driven before the wind like chaff on the hills, like tumbleweed before the gale. In the evening, sudden terror. Before the morning, they are gone. This is the portion of those who loot us, the lot of those who plunder us.
Okay. So if we go back to verses 5, 6, 7, they're talking about the remaining gleaning and like the beating of an olive trees, or so they're talking about there's not much left, only a couple of berries at the top of the trees. And then in verses 10 and 11 is where the word you is used. All right. Yes, you have put out of mind the God who delivers you. Your strong crag you have not kept in mind. Therefore you may plant the plants of the lovely one and sow the cutting of an alien. So that you it's thought that that's addressing Judah. It's talking about Judah. So you are forgetting this. You may let them grow on the day you plant, you may let them grow, and in the morning you sow, get it to blossom. The harvest flees on the day of sickness and mortal pain. So Syria and Damascus are in dire straits too. And what's the lesson for Judah in this? So Golden Gay makes the point though that God is saying in here, though the end not need be the end. The end doesn't need to be the end. Do we see a place that you think it's referring to that?
7, on that day, a person will turn to his maker, and the eyes will look to Israel's Holy One.
Right, 14, toward evening time there, terror. Before morning, it is no more. So it's hard for us to see that. It's hard for me as I read this to think there's any statement of hope. But for the people at that time, there were that interjections of hey, there is some hope here. You can do something about this. You can make it different, and we can too. You know, is that hope still here for us? Golden Gate describes that Yahweh is like a farmer sitting, waiting in the heat of summer for the right moment to harvest the crops. But before the grape harvest, there's further tough pruning and discarding that has to be done. You know, when those grapes first come out, apparently you've got to go through and clear out some stuff to get a really decent grape harvest. You know, you got to do some pruning. So again, the implication isn't simply that there's never to be a relationship between Yahweh and a far off nation like Sudan. All right, Sudan. All right, so Sudan is in chapter 18. So we need to go through and read chapter 18 and we'll finish up with that. All right. Would somebody like to read chapter 18 verses 1-7? All right. And my Bible calls Sudan, another name for it is Cush, C-U-S-H. So in 18:1, does everybody else's Bible say Sudan?
Yeah, and,
This is Kush.
Cush, Cush is Sudan.
right, and.
I have Nubia.
Nubia.
I have Ethiopia.
I have,
Yeah.
I have
I got
Ethiopia.
Yeah.
Well, and those
Somebody
are
needs to go to
interconnected.
geography
No,
class.
no, it's not
No,
that,
no,
because
it
the
could-
Kushites were the people, these darker skinned people in a region of Africa. And so that area had different names at different times. But they were generally considered to be from that region of Ethiopia. So your version may be using a more modern name for it, but Moses is,
In the Good News Bible would have.
yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they understood geography.
No, they
Well,
understand
no.
modern geography. They're trying to connect it to people that are reading it today.
Since one of
As
my college
opposed to-
professors was on the
yeah.
committee that translated the Old Testament.
And
You know, he talked about, they tried to, so where the Cushites were may have been more where we think of as modern day Ethiopia.
Okay, well, I'll read it, and when I say Ethiopia, you think Kushite, okay?
well, but it's
All
also,
the,
yeah, one of the connections I wanted to make, Moses' wife was referred to as a Cushite. So we know that Moses's wife was from this region as well, so the people have origin in that connection as well, so they have a family connection.
Okay,
all right, so chapter 18.
all right. Beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, there's a land where the sound of wings is heard. From that land, ambassadors come down from the Nile in boats made of reeds. Go back home, swift messengers. Take a message back to your land divided by rivers, to your strong and powerful nation, to your tall and smooth-skinned people who are feared all over the world. Listen, everyone who lives on this earth. Look at the signal flag to be raised on the mountaintops. Listen for the blowing of the bugle. The Lord said to me, I will look down from the heaven as quietly as it warms in the warm nights of harvest time, as serenely as the sun shines in the heat of the day. Before the grapes are gathered, when the blossoms have all fallen and the grapes are ripening, the enemy will destroy the Ethiopians as easily as a knife cuts branches from a vine. The corpses of their soldiers will be left exposed to the birds and the wild animals. In summer, the birds will feed on them. In the winter, the animals. A time is coming when the Lord Almighty will receive offerings from this land divided by the rivers, this strong and powerful nation, this tall and smooth-skinned people who are feared all over the world. They will come to Mount Zion, where the Lord Almighty is worshipped.
Y'all remember the lost boys of Sudan?
Oh,
You know, and there's a good number of them that settled in the West End. And so they're getting to be middle-aged men now. But they are they tend to be very tall, extremely dark skin. Their skin is very smooth. So that's
Slender, tall, slender. dark skin.
all cinder, very, very dark skin.
Mhm.
And that's the image that comes to my mind, that came to my mind when I was reading this was, so that quality of skin still is there, you know, from that area of the world.
It's interesting. I mean, my references to the whirring wings means it is referring to it being an insect infested land. And that's the other
Yeah,
thing.
mine
we
uses
gotta-
the word locust.
Yeah,
Oh,
we've got to
yeah.
remember about Ethiopia at this time was a lush, rich, region full of forests and it's a rich land as opposed to what we know Ethiopia has today, which is very desert and dismal, because of the abuse that has been wrought on it over the centuries.
And Ethiopia has, what we know as modern day Ethiopia has a very rich heritage. I mean, it is predominantly a Muslim country now, but back, I'm not sure exactly when, and Sarah might remember, there was a Jewish temple in Ethiopia.
There's a large Christian community as well.
And an ancient Christian, it goes back.
Yeah, I was
it's
gonna
not
say
Coptic.
I thought it was Coptic.
Coptic is in Egypt.
Okay.
It's not, I don't think it's Coptic, but it is very ancient, and the tradition or mythology is that some of the ancient Old Testament scrolls were in Egypt, in Ethiopia. So, there's a very strong tradition of ancient Judaism and ancient Christianity in Ethiopia.
I know we've had once or twice at the Folk Festival, there's been a group of Orthodox Christians from Ethiopia who have sung Orthodox ancient Christian music.
Wasn't one of them, they were throat singers?
Mm.
Yeah, they might have been, yeah.
Yeah, but
That
they're,
sounds right.
yeah, and I forget where I saw it, it must be on Netflix or something. But it was an unusual, I heard a little bit. Yeah,
In Australia, there's a dialect that has that clicking with in the Aborigines, I think. Where it's like
yeah.
It
wasn't so
much
much,
it was
but it was deep in the.
The gods must be crazy. That was
Yeah.
that was the
Right.
kind of
that's where I
language
remembered
they
it
had.
from.
Yeah, that was a great movie.
Yep. Okay, so God's waiting for the right time to harvest, and this chapter ends with those last couple of verses. So then an offering will be brought to Yahweh Sabaoth, the Lord of hosts, the Lord's armies, on behalf, because we talked about that word Sabaoth, or what's translated a lot is the word Sabaoth, first of all, is on the back of now all military vehicles in Israel, the Lord's army. All right. And so that in some Bibles that's translated the Lord of hosts. Golden Gate translates it Yahweh's armies. All right. So it will be brought to Yahweh Sabaoth, the Lord's armies, on behalf of a people tall and bronze, on behalf of a people feared near and far, on behalf of a mighty and masterful nation whose country is crisscrossed with rivers, to the place where the name of Yahweh Sabaoth resides, Mount Zion. So we're going to bring them to Mount Zion. All right. So in Golden Gate, if we had time to talk about Egypt, he talks about how some of that prophecy came to whoever teaches next week. All right, how that prophecy came to be in a different kind of way than what perhaps Isaiah would have expected. All right, so a little cliffhanger for next week.
Teaser.
A little teaser, that's right, a little teaser for next week, so. All right, anything anybody wants to add about Sudan, Kush? Oh,
Well, if the same term is Nubian, then that's the country just below Egypt, before the Ptolemies, and they were rich in gold, and Egypt and the Nubians warred all the time, and Egypt had food, Nubians had gold, but I don't know if Nubians is another term for Sudan or not.
okay. Don't know either.